Hello and welcome. I'm Ethna Trainer and this is Spotlight, a webinar series brought to you by the 23rd World Petroleum Congress. Now, the World Petroleum Congress is held every 3 years, and without a doubt, it's one of the most important events on the global energy calendar. This year it takes place in the host city of Houston, where it will present a unique series of conversations with thought leaders from around the world. So December 2021, all roads lead to Texas, USA. The World Petroleum Congress and our Congress sponsors are absolutely delighted to be able to bring you this series of webinars. This is really where we gather candid insights into a multitude of innovative solutions that will shape the future of energy. And this is our 4th episode, Shaping the Future of Energy Through Innovative Partnerships. And joining us for our conversation, Liam Mallon. He's the president of ExxonMobil Upstream Oil and Gas Company. And we're also joined by Greg Hill. He's the president and the chief operating officer of Hess Corporation. Our moderator for this session, Ken Medlock. He's the senior director for the Center of Energy Studies at the Baker Institute. Now, these leaders will share their perspectives on partnerships and, of course, the increasingly important role that partnerships are playing in any project's success and indeed shaping the future of energy. I'm going to hand over now to Ken to guide us through episode 4 of Spotlight. So Ken, over to you.
Etna, thank you for those words of welcome. I'm very pleased to have Greg Hill and Liam Mallon here with me today to talk about really the role of partnerships in driving success across the industry. And in a world where we talk a lot about energy transitions, we talk a lot about the continuing importance of oil and gas as we move forward, which is something that, receives various amount of attention in different circles. But certainly, I think as we look forward, and I think the two gentlemen that join me here today would agree with this, oil and gas will be a very important part of our energy mix as we move forward. But seeing that success to its fruition is going to require increased engagement, not just across the industry, but also with governments, with communities. And this really is at the core of our discussion today, I think. And hopefully we'll be able to get through in this conversation a really, I think, nice perspective on the role of partnerships and the importance of partnerships in achieving scale economies, deploying new technologies to minimize costs, reduce environmental impact, and really convey a greater societal benefit across the board. So with that, welcome, Greg, welcome, Liam. I want to dive right into the questions here, and hopefully we can keep this as conversational as possible. I want to start with technology because it's sort of at the core of all things energy transitions. And I would love to get your perspectives on not only the robustness of technology in the energy industry, but how it's evolving and what your perspectives are on how that will shape the way not only the industry is perceived going forward, but how you conduct yourselves on day-to-day business and from a planning perspective. So, Greg, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, Ken, thanks. Let me first say I'm delighted to join you for today's panel and really been looking forward to our discussion. Trusted partnerships are at the heart of how Hess operates. It really ties to our values and our purpose as a company to be the most trusted energy partner in the world. And that, of course, applies to all of our stakeholders, business partners, employees, host governments, and communities. And let me say up front that ExxonMobil and Hess share many of these same values and aspirations, I think, and that's why I think our partnership is so successful. Now, diving right into technology, technology is vital, but to me, it's really innovation that's the ultimate goal, because technology on its own, doesn't necessarily produce innovation. It's innovation is a human process, right? The technology just helps enable. And if I think about the shale revolution, completely different approach to horizontal drilling and fracturing that really unlocked resources that made the U.S., an energy powerhouse in less than 10 years, which is remarkable when you think about it. Now, when we think about technology, our approach is to cast a wide net. So not only within our industry, but outside our industry, and constantly scanning the horizon to identify technologies, and then apply them as quickly as we can, in the field. And we're really focused on 4 key areas. The first one being what we call autonomous field of the future. And so that's robotics, remote sensing, use of artificial intelligence, to develop and monitor and maintain our fields with actually minimum workforce, which helps in the EHS risk, but also, of course, increases production and profitability. The second area we're focused on is what we call 10x well and reservoir productivity. So this is next generation stimulation, and enhanced recovery in our reservoirs. And there's been some amazing breakthroughs, which I'll talk about later, in partnership with the University of Wyoming, that is the only place in the world that can actually image flow through porous media at the molecular level. So for the first time, we're really understanding how this process really works. Our third area is around data. Data is the new oil. And it's really using high-powered computing, artificial intelligence to make much better decisions. I can process seismic today in days, whereas several years ago, it was months, right? So the explosion of the speed of computing and cloud computing, all those things have just made a massive difference, to our business. And then the last area that we're focused on is what I call perfect parts partnerships. And that's using advanced materials, 3D printing, to lower costs, improve reliability, and speed up replacement cycle time. So, the amount of technological change I've seen in the past 10 years in this business is truly incredible and remarkable, and has made a huge difference to our bottom line.
Thank you, Greg. It's interesting, your response to that question, because you really highlighted a number of partnerships that really extend outside traditional oil and gas domains, highlighting the role of data as the new oil, how you actually process that, how you gather that, integration with all sorts of new technological ventures that I think really can be eye-opening to somebody who is maybe uninitiated to the field, because the oil and gas industry is certainly one of the largest consumers of technology on the planet, but that, of course, leads to a tremendous number of partnerships. Liam, I wonder if you could share your perspectives on that.
Well, thanks, Ken. Well, firstly, let me add my thank you, and great to see you, and Greg, great to see you. Hopefully it'll be soon face to face, but we really appreciate getting the opportunity to do it. So thanks for this opportunity. Ken, let me build a little bit. I mean, we tend to think about it, in 2 dimensions a little bit. First of all, is very much in our day-to-day operations, and I'll give a couple of examples that I think to bring this to life. And secondly, what role does technology play in the future? And as you alluded to in your opening remarks, clearly very much forefront of our minds today is the role technology plays in a lower carbon future, and in particular for us, the significant role that we think we can play in helping to decarbonize those tougher sectors using CCS and low carbon hydrogen and other things. But in our day to day, I would just say, Ken, I think we continually get surprised at the pace of penetration and the pace of technological evolution, and none more so than today. I mean, I think we all go back and we've all been through the breakthroughs, whether it's 3D seismic, whether it's horizontal drilling and fracking. But today it really is around rapid innovation around data and the enormous efficiencies that's enabling us to progress, in our business. Think about the Permian. You may have seen we signed a deal with Microsoft. It's the biggest cloud-enabled piece of oil and gas acreage in the world, and it's helping us track where all the multitude of people are, what they're doing, the productivity improvements, the safety improvements, just the whole innovation cycle in the day-to-day business is hugely material, and it's happening in a very different way. Open source platforms are enabling collaboration to do that. in a way that's very different than the past when we sort of did it in-house. So we relied on one or two companies that we could bring inside the tent, so to speak, to do it. That has fundamentally changed with open source data collaboration, and it's frankly changing the game. It's changing the whole concept of partnership in technology evolution. A little bit about the future, Ken. I think it's important. Fundamentally, the role that technology will play in advancing us towards the Paris Agreement goals and advancing us towards a lower carbon future, I think is the next great evolution, and that's across the whole energy sector. Whether it's in renewables, whether it's in carbon capture, whether it's in hydrogen, whether it's in bios or other things, and I think it is fundamental to these net zero targets that many societies are demanding around the world. And again, the way that we're partnering to do that is fundamentally different than it's ever been in the past. So, it's very exciting. And if anything, Ken, I would say it's growing exponentially, and the applicability is changing to a much wider degree, perhaps, than we might have thought about in the past.
I wonder, Liam, and I'll start with you, if you could maybe comment a little bit on what you think has driven the success of that partnership and how you think that might translate into future engagement across the industry.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Well, first and foremost, we have a fantastic opportunity in Guyana. I mean, you've seen the numbers, over 9 billion barrels of resource discovered to date, and still relatively early in the whole exploration and development phase. But it talks to a very important point. For me at least, and I think the foundation of a solid partnership, and I think nowhere more true than in Guyana, is being aligned around a common goal. And I think invariably when you see that, and that goal is clear, and all the partners are aligned on that goal, then it sets the relationship up for success, and it makes it relatively straightforward. And this is not really just us and our co-venturers. It's the government, it's the communities, it's the whole spectrum, as Greg alluded to earlier on. So first and foremost, Ken, I think it's vital that our interests are aligned, and they're aligned on a common goal. I think the second thing I would say, and we have huge respect for the partners in the Stabroek Block, and that respect comes from years of working together, and we have a tremendous, deep, trusting relationship, and we have very strong personal relationships too, that are leveraged to a very large degree to make this a very effective partnership. So number one, to me, it's a common goal. Number two, it's the depth of the relationships that are built around respect and trust. And I think the third area then is recognizing what each party brings to the partnership, and understanding those strengths and leveraging those strengths. And again, that spans the full spectrum, all the way from the government as the resource holder right back through the co-venturers. And I will say, Ken, that I've worked on many. This is an exceptional partnership, and I think it is founded in those three common things. And when you pull that together, you can make great things happen, and that's what we're seeing in Guyana.
I think it's interesting you mentioned alignment of goals. Of course, that's going to be important in any partnership, even outside of this industry. But the things that I think are unique to oil and gas, which I'm going to ask you both to comment on in just a minute, are engagement with the government and local communities. That community stakeholder engagement is critical, and it leads to the proverbial license to operate, which I think is also incredibly important in any partnership venture as we sort of think about the future of the industry. But before we get into that, and maybe Greg, you can sort of lean into it a little bit in your response to the question that I just asked, but in thinking about success of the partnership that you have in Stabroek in particular, how does that actually help tell some important stories or lessons, if you will, about the importance of partnerships going forward.
Well, I think, look, I'm going to repeat a lot of what Liam says, but, I think it really starts with this shared long-term view. Exxon and the government of Guyana signed a PSC to explore a completely unproven basin in 1999. And, it took 16 years before that first discovery in 2015. Now, fortuitous for us, one of the JV partners that Exxon had before, kind of lost patience, and that opened the door for us. But it really started with that shared long-term view that we think there's something here, and we think we can make a huge difference, to this country. And the next key thing that I think is important in the partnership, particularly that we have with ExxonMobil, is, we've got this shared objective, as Liam said, but we also have the shared values. The single most important thing to me that I've found after 38 years in this business is that if you find partners that share the same values as you can get through most anything. The biggest disconnect is when you don't have the same sense of values. The next thing I would say that's key to the success in Guyana is what Liam said. 1 + 1 = 3. So it's built upon these complementary technical skills coupled with that shared sense of value, so that each partner truly does bring something to the table and is truly committed to the success, not only of the project, but also of the country of Guyana, which is extremely important that the citizens of Guyana feel the same success that the companies do. And finally, kind of a shout out to ExxonMobil. I think the approach that they've taken to enter into long-term relationships with a few critical suppliers, to design one and build many, is allowing exceptionally high degrees of standardization, more than I've ever seen in my career, that has dramatically improved cycle time and cost. So the suppliers are playing a very key role in this as well. And, indeed, the production bill that Guyana will see, to call it 1 million barrels a day, in 2026, is the fastest multi-phased offshore province development in history. And that combination of speed and lower cost, because of the partnerships, is really translating into a win-win for, of course, all the companies involved, but especially the country of Guyana. It establishes a transformative new industry in Guyana that spurred investment, jobs, opportunities for generations to come. And in fact, the IMF projects that Guyana is going to be the world's most positive rate of change story, over the next 5 years. And that really gratifies me as an individual, knowing that you are making a huge difference, in the lives of so many people, through what you do. So very gratifying.
I wonder if y'all can both maybe share some comments, and Liam, again, I'll start with you, on maybe some past experiences, if you can speak to your own engagement in different parts around the world, different places around the world, that would be great. But how you've actually seen activities that you've been engaged with really improve circumstances in the local communities where they're affected.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ken. And I think at the end of the day, we've been doing this for a long time, as you said, in many parts of the world. But I think the fundamental thing, Ken, that really is important is you've got to start with a bit of a vision of what does sustainable development look like beyond the resource. What you find is during the days of resource development, it's far from straightforward, but there's job creation, there's training expansion, there's local content expansion, there's capacity building, there's training. all those things that you would expect, and we've done very successfully in many parts of the world over many years. And to be clear, that's foundational. You really have to do that well, and I could point to many examples, Ken, all over the world for us. PNG, if you think about where we started in PNG, in a very challenging country, and where we are today, many places in Africa where I've personally lived and seen what we do during the resource development stage. And I think, frankly, as you think about the resource holders as the customer for what we do, you have to do that. When you step back from the very start and you think about how do you make that sustainable beyond, what we bring to the party? How do you create something that will last because you've developed capacity, you've grown capability, you've helped people lift out of poverty and understand how to make the economy stronger, independent. I'm really proud of the way we're approaching that all around the world, but in particularly in Guyana, again with Greg. But we've spent a lot of time understanding the needs and wants of society, trying to understand what other hubs will be valuable beyond oil and gas, and we believe we have a very important role to play in that.
That's excellent. Greg, wonder if you could wax on the same question.
Yeah, no, I think, gas as a company, it's part of our DNA that goes back, to the 87 or 88 years, that we've existed as a company. Is, we want to leave a lasting legacy that goes beyond, the things that Liam talked about. I mean, the obvious things are you create jobs and, all that kind of stuff. But we also look at the societal needs of that country. And we tackle community-specific societal challenges in partnership with host governments. For a lot of times it's focused on education and healthcare. And we have a well-established track record of multi-year, multi-million-dollar societal initiatives in partnership with these governments. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but they're not only in these, underprivileged countries, but they're also right here at home in the U.S. So, give an example. In Equatorial Guinea, we funded a program called PRODEHE, which means progress, and it was an education initiative that provided training for thousands of primary school teachers, because most students never made it past the third grade in EG. And established school libraries, and we made a difference to the lives of over 150,000 students. So again, it's this lasting legacy that you made a huge difference to that community. In North Dakota, we funded a $25 million education and workforce initiative that was really designed to ensure that North Dakota students completed high school and were better prepared for college. And then in the city of Houston, so you think, wow, Houston's a pretty wealthy economy. Well, no, Houston has some issues. And we've contributed, $7.5 million in education programs in 2 underserved neighborhoods. And now we're expanding that to a third economic disadvantaged neighborhood in Houston. That's going to be another $9 million commitment over the next 3 years from HES. We're one of the lead sponsors in the Houston Mayor's Complete Communities Initiative, which is really aimed to address racial inequities. So we see that as a societal problem that we want to be part of the solution. And then, of course, whenever there's a disaster, HES is there. We just contributed $2 million to the freeze efforts, $1 million to the food bank, $1 million to the mayor's efforts to really get power, back to underserved communities. And then, of course, Guyana to me represents an incredible opportunity. I think the country of Guyana has the chance to be, call it the Singapore of South America, or the Abu Dhabi of South America. And I think the leaders of Guyana have that vision as well. So really excited about the co-venturer's role in being the catalyst, to make that bright future for the country of Guyana.
Energy transitions, of course, dominate most conversations around energy, the emergence of new technologies. But we've lived through a global pandemic that, sent shockwaves through the global economy, and really, had very far-reaching implications for every aspect of how we live our lives. We've all actually had conversations about how we work now versus how we worked a year and a half ago. So everything is different. But given that ability to kind of step back and view what's happened over the last year, I wonder if you could, share your thoughts on the challenges and opportunities you see going forward as a result of everything we've just lived through, and how you think partnerships will play either a diminished or increasingly important. I think probably more the latter than the former, but I'll leave it open to each of you to comment on this. But Greg, if you could start with your thoughts on that, and then Liam, we'll get your thoughts as well.
Sure. So, yeah, I think there are several important realities that you have to recognize when I think about the future, and I think the first one, which we've already talked about, is oil and gas is here to stay for a long time, and the energy transition is going to take decades. So I think that's a you might call it an inconvenient truth, but it is a truth, because oil and gas is in the near term is impossible to replace, because it absolutely permeates every aspect of our lives. I think the second thing, when I look forward to the future, is that volatility is here to stay. It arguably could become even more pronounced depending upon the speed of the energy transition. And I think the third thing that's kind of a new reality, is that investor expectations are changing for our industry, both in terms of requiring shorter term returns of capital and in terms of ESG expectations. So the way to deal with volatility and increasing investor return expectations is, you've got to have a low-cost portfolio. It's a commodity business that delivers extremely efficient capital and resource utilization. Now, to achieve this, Hess has reshaped our portfolio, but we've also focused on building fewer, deeper, longer partnerships, key suppliers. And the criteria that we use in making these kind of long-term partnership decisions really involves three dimensions. So the first one, and I alluded to this earlier, is, do we share the same values and long-term commitment to each other's success as partners? So do we truly think and behave in a win-win fashion? For example, during the downturn, we didn't beat up our suppliers for cost reductions. We said, how are we going to work together so we can both be successful? And then finally, when tested, do we use legalese to resolve disputes, or do we work it out together? So values are really, really important. The second thing we look at is, are we both committed to top quartile execution? So not just being in the top quartile, but does this partnership actually define the top quartile, such that the strength of our partnership is unmatched by the competition? I always say, who's ever heard of or wants to be known as Alexander the Average, right? Excellence is what we strive for every day. And a key tool in our tool chest is some of the lean manufacturing principles, which is really a cultural mindset of, this one team that's focused on the same objective and is just relentlessly driving out waste and constantly improving everything we do on a day-to-day basis. And it's really hard work, because part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to undo 100 years of a paradigm in this industry that, well, I'm the operator, I'll tell you what to do and how to do it, versus letting the people who actually do the work figure out how best to do it. Because remember, it's our suppliers that actually execute all of the work really on our behalf. And then the third and final criteria that we look at in these long-term partnerships, are we constantly innovating through technology to reinvent ourselves, every day, every week? Are we constantly thinking about that? And Many companies can meet two of those three criteria, but I'll tell you, it's the rare few that can meet all three. And those that can are our strategic partners, and we've been partners with them for a very long time. So now ESG, again, we have a great track record here as being a leader in ESG, but as the issue evolves, as you mentioned, Ken, I envision many new partnerships are going to be required. And that includes, constructing industry and government partnerships and relationships are going to be critical because, the right policy choices can provide significant benefits in terms of investment, social and economic growth, job creation. And I think what's really important is an orderly energy transition. So there will be many new partnerships that emerge out of this. And, later on, I'll talk about a few that Hess is actually involved in, kind of in this space.
Liam, I wonder if you could, share your thoughts on that, since I sort of drew on your initial comment about being able to step back and look at a situation and understand what sustainability actually means. How have you been looking at the situation as we emerge from 2020, and what do you think partnerships will look like as we move forward?
Well, I think maybe the first thing, Ken, and look, I think we should acknowledge the men and women of our industry for what everybody went through in 2020, and it's fascinating when you listen to whether it's earnings results at year end or investor days that are the industry companies have been doing, almost to a person, people talk about despite the pandemic, exceptional performance. So, but we know, Ken, that performance came from the extraordinary sacrifices that the men and women of our industry made all over the world. And I think about people rotating to drilling rigs, rotating to platforms, living remotely, managing here in Houston with family, with health concerns, and still, knocking it out of the park from a performance perspective. So, I think if we've learned anything from the last year, Ken, is that, first of all, we have an extraordinarily resilient industry, and we have extraordinarily resilient people. And that's despite, many people having to make redundancies, despite the pandemic and the anxiety and the loneliness and fatigue that it continues to bring with it. So I really think, Ken, first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that and just reflect on that a little bit in terms of, you talked about working from home. It's taught us a lot about a different future, but it's also been a sobering reminder of the resilience of our people and the resilience of our industry. So I think that's very important, Ken. As I reflect on your question, I come back to the data point that Greg started to, but put a little data on it. And talking about the future, if you like, and I think again we got a reminder that there is a future. Yes, there is a transition that I think we all aspire to a lower carbon future. But if you just think about oil and gas and you look at any of the scenarios, the IPCC 2 degrees scenario, oil and gas are still in the 50% of the mix by 2040. Then you overlay depletion and you think about, in our business, in the upstream business, these gas fields and oil fields deplete at 5 or 7% a year. So you start from where we are today, and you think about a scenario where, okay, we don't like this industry, we're not going to invest. That depletes to 22 million barrels a day by 2040. And even if oil and gas is only half the demand picture, we still need 70 to 80 million barrels a day. So it just reminds us, Ken, that the investment required in the oil and gas business to meet even a very aggressive 2 degree scenario is significant. It's in the trillions of dollars, and it will require collaboration, innovation, and technology application at a scale that we've never seen before. You then combine that with the challenge of lowering emissions and decarbonizing the hard to decarbonize sectors, and again, helping society meet its net zero goals. That's the dual challenge that we all refer to. So the point being in all that is, yes, it's an enormous challenge, but it also is an enormous opportunity. For us, the key thing is that in a world where the uncertainty range is dramatically greater, perhaps, than it's ever been, some would argue it's not, but I think it is, then being on the left-hand side of the supply curve in your business is crucially important. Greg talked about lowest cost of supply. I think for us, we have a portfolio of opportunities that we haven't had since Exxon and Mobil came together. And for us, mission critical is we develop those opportunities at the lowest cost of supply and make them competitive regardless of that scenario you choose. And I can tell you, to do that will require partnership, collaboration, and technological evolution at a scale that at least will continue to extrapolate on what we've seen in the past. And I'm confident, we can do that. But at the same time as doing that, Ken, we, all of us in the industry, have to do our part to progress society towards a lower carbon, lower emissions outcome. And that is an enormous focus for us as a company. It's an enormous focus for the industry. Just today, you may have seen it's hot off the press. We went out with a blog today and an op-ed on the concept of a carbon capture and storage innovation hub in the Houston Chip Channel. And you think about, what that would entail. Potentially, $100 billion of investment, literally tens of thousands of jobs. But to make it happen would require the private sector, academia, government at every single layer of government, the community, to come together in a way and collaborate that we have never seen before. And we fundamentally believe that we can play a key role in that. And the potential of doing something like that, if all the necessary pieces, policy, regulatory, pricing, et cetera, were in place, has the potential to take 50 to 100 million tons of CO2 out of the air in the next several years, and is just equivalent to an enormous emissions reduction effort right here in the city of Houston, taking advantage of re-injecting carbon or CO2 into the Gulf of Mexico, right beside all the expertise that we've developed over many, many years. But to do that at scale, will require us to think about the role of partnerships in a fundamentally different way beyond what we've thought about in the past. So, you teed it up. It's going to grow and expand. I don't see a future where anybody alone can do this. It will be dependent upon effective collaboration of multiple stakeholders. And I just think, hot off the press, it is a fantastic concept, and it has the potential to create a huge innovation hub right here in the city of Houston, and is very, very exciting.
When you look forward, do you see as being, potentially the role that your companies respectively will play with academic institutions, with government institutions, in developing the next frontier of technologies? And how important has that collaboration been historically, when we think about where we are today, and ultimately where we will be 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now? Greg, I'll start with you on that one, and then definitely get to your thoughts on that later.
We're entering into a new phase in the world that is going to require, absolute collaboration of everyone, all stakeholders, from companies to governments to actually consumers and the public, right? Now, specific to your question, academia has always played a role in that. Just give you one example, which I mentioned earlier. So we've sponsored research at the University of Wyoming. So we have almost a $50 million investment in that. Why the University of Wyoming? Because it's one of the most advanced experimental oil and gas research facilities in the world. So it's the only place in the world that can image flow through porous media at the macro, micro, and molecular level. So for the first time, we can actually see the flow of hydrocarbons through pores at the molecular level, and we're actually rewriting the fundamental physics of flow through porous media. And that has huge applications to breakthroughs in recovery, both in tight oil reservoirs like the Bakken, but also we're doing studies in for Guyana as well. I think it also has huge application to carbon capture and storage as well, which is another flow through porous media issue. And then importantly, how do you make it stick, or how do you make it stay there? Because CO2 likes to move around, and try and make its way back up to the surface. Broader than that, in the last 5 years in particular, we've broken out from our traditional oil and gas focused collaborations, I would say, with, say Halliburton and, Schlumberger, et cetera, which do a lot of the research in oil and gas. And we've really expanded our lens and our field of view to include a much broader open innovation network. And from that has come some of these technologies that I talked about before. So, robotics, artificial intelligence, aerospace, we're grabbing whatever we can from all those, collaborating with those companies that, some of which are startups, which in the past we never would have collaborated, with startups, for example. And this has really allowed us to accelerate the speed of innovation and also the implementation of innovation. And I just see that expanding and growing, particularly given the dual challenge that we talked about. Now, a couple of areas that I'm most excited about are some of the research that we're investing in that have the potential to mitigate climate change. We've entered into a long-term relationship with the Salk Institute to support their Harnessing Plants initiative. And this is R&D that's aimed at developing plants, crops, which represent a large portion of the plants in the world, developing plants with larger and deeper root systems that have more suberin in the roots. And as a result of that, they're capable of absorbing and storing billions of tons of carbon per year from the atmosphere. Because what happens when you grow crops, when you plow them up, all the carbon that got stored in that plant when it was growing, by the way, it's the most effective carbon machine in the world is a plant. When you plow it up, that carbon gets released. What this would do is make that root system so deep and extensive that it actually stays in the ground.
Liam, I know Exxon has a long history of engagement with academic institutions and with governments and national labs. I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that as well.
We partner with 80 different universities around the world. So 80 different academic institutions and the 5 energy centers that you know well, and primarily around advancing technologies in this whole area of a lower carbon future. Primarily, not solely, but primarily. One thing in terms of shifts, Ken, or strategic shifts, if you like, and I'll come back to a few examples with those universities that are very exciting. But I think one of the shifts that's going on, certainly for us, but I suspect for the industry, and it is, I think it's related to the open data architecture and the way innovation is happening, is, traditionally ExxonMobil have had a very, I would say, discipline-oriented approach to research and development. More and more what we're finding is it's the intersection of these sciences that's creating the innovation and having end use cases that cause that intersection to come together. It is shifting the dynamic from in-house developed to much more, I would say, third party, externally developed. So, I'm not sure how wholesome that trend is, but I suspect it's pretty wholesome, but it's certainly something we are seeing. So again, to your point, Ken, I see us doing more in the external space, and I think it'll be very powerful for this partnership that you're talking about. A couple of exciting things, Ken, that are not yet there, but they're very exciting. In partnership with UC Berkeley and the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, there's a lot of really promising work going on new materials to enhance the capture of CO2. I mean, mostly it's amine-based technology, as you know. So there is some very exciting work going on what they call tetraamine functionalized metal organic frameworks, but has the potential to significantly improve the capture. The other exciting area I'll tell you about is in the membrane area when it comes to the potential use of new membrane technology to reduce emissions and the energy intensity associated with refining crude oil, which has really been the same technology for many, many, many years. And the potential to find new membranes that could do that and dramatically drop the intensity, it is very, very exciting. The other thing that I'm particularly excited about, Ken, is all the work that's going on right here with in Texas around methane emissions and array networks and monitoring. I mean, it has the potential again to fundamentally change the footprint and efficiency and the overall environmental outcomes of what we do here, particularly in the unconventional space. And that's not possible without these academia participating and bringing, their innovation to the party. So, again, I see it expanding quite significantly. I think it's going further down the value chain. And I think companies are rethinking the way they thought about traditional research. And it really is bringing together a very different set of scientific fundamentals than perhaps the way we thought about it in the past. So it's pretty exciting to see it.
And on that note, and in the interest of time, I want to ask you a question to sort of really close the session on, because I think it does speak to all of those points, but it also opens the door for you to comment a little bit about the meeting later this year here in Houston, and maybe what you're looking forward to as we approach that date. But I sit at a university at Rice, and I have the opportunity to speak to graduate and undergraduate students who all have an interest in energy. And they initially come in with a very specific view about the industry, right? And it's always interesting to see as they learn, their eyes open to how broad and diverse the sector actually is, and how diverse even an oil and gas job is becoming. You mentioned data is the new oil. You've mentioned the importance of interdisciplinary approaches to various problems. Well, all of those things are eye-opening to students, but I'm hoping you could, sort of in thinking about the future, provide some advice to those who are watching this and thinking about their careers going forward in the energy industry, or even stepping into this space. What role partnerships will play in their success. How they might actually think about broadening their horizons, if you will, and really engaging with a broader network of individuals, which is something I know that the World Petroleum Congress really will facilitate later this year. But maybe comment on all those things and sort of wrap up with what you're looking forward to later this year, where we're all able to get together. So, Liam, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Well, it's a great question, and I think it is a question on every young person's mind. I have 3 young kids, and 2 of them in the energy sector, or are keen to be in it, and it's a question they talk to me about all the time. And look, Ken, I think a few things are important. I think from the discussion today, hopefully our passion for what lies ahead came through. And to me, the thing that strikes me perhaps more than anything else, if I think about my past, I thought of it as an oil and gas career doing traditional things. The career of the future is a much more expansive career shaping the future. And there's not many times you have an opportunity to join an industry that is shaping a very different future. And you think about what we do. What we do is we make the products that are essential for human progress. That's what we do. We make the products that are essential for human progress. And the expansion of the broad energy sector, the role that the energy sector will play in decarbonizing the hard to decarbonize sectors, the innovation that will require, we've talked about all day. So to me, the opportunity space to have an energy career, including oil and gas within that energy components, is probably more exciting now than it's ever been.
Absolutely. Greg?
Well, look, I think, attracting and retaining talent, like Liam said, and in this highly technical, knowledge-based industry like ours is absolutely critical. And that's one of the reasons why I agreed to serve as the co-chair of the WPC's Young Professionals Committee. And here's what I would say. To a student thinking about a career in the energy industry. First of all, if you want to truly make a difference in the world, you've come to the right place. Our industry will provide the world's energy that will continue for decades to come. And the key to the world's prosperity is energy. It is the single most important key to prosperity on the planet is energy. And we're a force for good. We lift people out of poverty and we drive global economic development. And that's what's kept me in this business for 38 years. It isn't about the pay. It isn't about the position. It's about how I feel when I get up in the morning, that I'm making a huge difference in the world to people I don't even know or can't even see. The other thing I would say is, ours is an industry of innovators. This industry has reinvented itself time and time again. I think it's probably the only industry in the world that has actually survived, the shocks in commodity price that is part of its history. Somehow we innovate our way out of that, and we're all standing on the backs of giants, resilient, innovative problem solvers in our industry who's tackled some of the greatest technical challenges of the 20th century. And it's those same kind of people that are going to tackle, the huge challenges, the world faces in this dual challenge that we already talked about. There's never been a more important time, I think, for smart, talented people who want to make their mark on the world, to join the energy industry. I agree with him. I think it's the most exciting time for industry, and it's going to require levels of multidisciplinary collaboration and partnerships and innovation that we've never ever seen in the history of this business. So, if I'm a young person, to me, it's a really exciting place to be, because it not only will tap into my technical skills, but it will also tap into hopefully my heart and soul, knowing that I'm making a huge difference, in the world. Now, when it comes to WPC, in December, what I'm most looking forward to is getting together face to face with people, and really have a new conversation, I think, that's important for the world, on how are we going to manage the energy transition in a way that's orderly, smart, and based in facts and data. And I hope that one of the outcomes of that is that people will not only be climate literate, but they'll be energy literate as well, and recognize that this is an and solution. It's kind of an all of the above strategy it's going to be required, for this challenge that the world faces. But exciting. It's going to be great to get together, talk to my colleagues about that, and looking forward to really talking about it on the world stage, which is what WPC is about. So thank you very much, Ken, for the time today. It's been great.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I'll just add one thing to what you said, because I thought both of your answers were phenomenal, and I look forward to sharing this actually with my own students. One thing I've noticed over the years is students are very technologically savvy today, much more so than I was when I was in college. And what's interesting about that is they approach the world through a different set of lenses. It's one where they really just want interesting problems to solve. And I've really been able to tap into that with my own experiences at Rice, and get people really motivated about energy in general, not just one aspect of energy. And when they do that, they see tremendous opportunities, because for all the challenges that exist, every challenge begets an opportunity. And I think what you guys have done today through this conversation is really highlight where some of those opportunities lie. And I really appreciate your very candid thoughts. So I look forward to seeing you both later this year at the World Petroleum Congress. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck in all your endeavors. Etna, I'll pass it back to you now.
And thank you, Ken, and your guests, Greg Hill and Lee Mallon. Thanks for your very candid comments on partnerships and the value to industry and indeed to wider society. In this session now, we really heard that alignment around common goals, shared values, and mutual respect, these are all key to successful partnerships. And this is true indeed for all partnerships, whether it's with a company, a host government, academic institutions, or indeed with the wider community. The ExxonMobil and Hess partnership in Guyana has demonstrated a shared long-term view. So what each party brings to the table is crucial. And that's ultimately what will work when it comes to building those deep relationships, respect and recognition, and indeed an in-depth understanding of each partner's strengths, of the complementary technologies, and indeed of the skills. So it's clearly this combination that was critical to the strong partnership, and indeed what's important to the success, I think, of all partnerships. Now, you also heard our two panel members talk about the necessity of sharing that success and really making sure that the country and the citizens of Guyana receive added value from such major projects. Our panelists also touched on technology, energy transition, and the low carbon future. Companies we see now are casting a wide net to identify technologies that apply to field development and ESG goals, resulting in partnerships outside of the oil and gas domains, and indeed at a scale and a pace that we have never seen before. Continuing to provide the world's energy needs while getting to net zero, this is the big challenge. And our panelists don't see a future where one company can go it alone. The industry, of course, will be part of the solution, and effective collaboration with multi-stakeholders, indeed working on an enormous scale, is absolutely essential. So a replay of this discussion will be available on the website for video on demand, that viewing within 24 hours. We're certainly looking forward to airing further episodes of Spotlights, and in the coming week we'll have our next episode, and that episode will focus on digital transformation. So remember, the 23rd World Petroleum Congress is scheduled later this year, December 5th to the 9th, 2021 in Houston, Texas. So that's it from me. Until the next time, please follow the 23rd World Petroleum Congress on social media. That's hashtag 23WPC 2021. And in the meantime, of course, stay involved and be sure to share this webinar with your friends and your colleagues. And without a doubt, check out all of the details that are on our website. So from all of us at the World Petroleum Congress and from all the Spotlight team, thank you for joining us. Take care.